Okay, so good morning. It is October 25th and it is Tuesday and I am on my Peloton. I'm going to try to stand a little bit further back in the frame, which is really odd as you're filming it, but I think as I watch these, and yes, that's hard when I'm going to work, and then like I said, I let it flow into whatever it goes into, which has always been wonderful to date. So today is going to be, and most of this week on, what does it mean to be awake and how does that relate to consciousness? To me, being awake means you're aware that the status quo is just not cutting it anymore. Status quo, I talk about the place in which we find ourselves right now. I will say that I think I started questioning things really early on. I remember someone said to me once that we could be in a foxhole and it could be imperative that we were quiet and your head would pop up and go, why? And then probably get shot off. But I would say that's probably pretty accurate. Probably one of the first things I started questioning was the Bible, Jesus, Christianity. I was raised, like I said, not in an overly religious family, but my parents wanted us to go to church and understand. I think all religions fundamentally promote kindness in people. So that's what they're going for, and that's what I agree. But I'm like, this just doesn't make sense to me from a very early age. And I remember more than one teacher said, we're not sure this is the right place for your daughter. And I wish that I had been in an environment that explored that a little bit more. Why? Because I think Christianity, I think whatever religion, I think they're wonderful. I think they were a living, breathing movement and a living, breathing text for people at the time. And I think that's what spirituality and religion should be. It should be your relationship with a higher power and the world you live in. That's a really good definition to me. Our world has always, always, always concerned me. There's a movie with Jodie Fisher and it's investigating the child prodigy. I think it's called Searching for Bobby Fischer or something like that. And her son is a savant, chess savant. But they're in New York and he goes and he looks at the little place where you used to get newspapers. Yep, that's how old I am, where you put a quarter in or whatever and pulled it down and you actually got a physical paper, but you could see, that's where the front of the whatever they had was really important, and it's the world and it's like doom. And the little kid is like, yeah, that was certainly me. Drama, I think that's what followed me into adulthood. It's just really sensitive how we talk to each other, how we treat each other, how we care for each other, and the big disparity and discrepancy. But again, I think in the last couple years, or particularly in the last year, I think where you place your focus is really important. It determines a lot of what you'll see. I think that I was reading self-help books at 10 or 12. Now I kind of laugh, but it's probably true. I was reading way above my grade level, thanks to my mother. And there's a lot of things I haven't been thankful for there, but I am certainly thankful for that. I'm not sure I had the emotional maturity or the life experience to wrap and evaluate what I was reading. But I think now I understand everything was just building upon everything else. I would have called myself agnostic. I don't think I understood what that word meant, as I didn't understand what an atheist or a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or anyone who subscribes to any mode of a dogma surrounding a religion. But I think for me, it was, I don't understand this. This isn't adding up, and I'm not going to commit. And I think that there's some really funny things about atheists and agnostics and jokes, but I don't really think it's funny deep down. I think it's me going, this doesn't make sense, and I'm just going to put that on the shelf and wait. I don't know what to call myself. I still don't know what to call myself. I would say that reality became very much suspect in the last 5 years. As I look back, probably for much, much longer than that. But I think, again, when we start to put our head up and look around, which I think when you do, and you look at reality, you should go WTF. Like, what? This does not make sense. So, what does that mean, this reality I live in? I'd say of course, there's this reality. I'm on my Peloton, I'm filming this video, I go to work, I interact, I take care of people, I come home. All the things that happen between now and the end of my day that are really important, they're all part of what I would call, the description I like best is the three-dimensional reality. So whether you just subscribe to multiple universes, multiple dimensions, a single dimension, whatever it is, and I think I started out because I have a very scientific background with physics. I love physics, not the beginning physics, that's all algebra, equations, which are all really important, but what we call theoretical physics, what Einstein was, what Hawking was, what Brian Greene is. He's probably my favorite. Max Tegmark wrote The Mathematical Universe. It's amazing. I think Greene and Tegmark are probably my favorite theoretical physicists, but I spent a lot of time reading just basic physics, because I will tell you, there is nothing stranger that's happened in my life than has happened in a theoretical physics book. So I would call this reality, where my consciousness is currently rooted, or what I'm aware of, is the third dimension. And I think there's a reality that you become aware of when you start to meditate in any form, whether I think just getting on this Peloton and walking is a form of meditation, and that was really hard for me when I thought, oh my gosh, I have to give up traditional meditation, and I don't. I'm still trying to work that back in the deep-seated way in which I was doing it. But I think when you go out in nature, when you take a bike ride, when you hike, when you create, when you knit, when you paint, when you compose music, to me those are all forms of meditation. I think they take you out of this really noisy world we're ensconced in, and they quiet that down. But I think what happens is something else comes up. It's a different kind of noise, universal static, the void, whatever you want to call it. But when you tone down all this, your ability to listen to whatever you want to call it, frequency, gifts, intuition, starts to increase a lot. And I think that's what I've heard called, or my favorite explanation is the fifth dimension. That's kind of where we're headed, hopefully. Then there's this big old number 4 in between, and I think of 4 as like an airport. And that's how I heard it described, my favorite. You need it, it's extremely useful, but it's not where you want to spend the majority of your time. And it's not like 3rd or 5th or 4th. Likely you're gonna bounce all around. People that are more evolved, I would call them ascended masters. I would call them the really great people on our planet, and not just the spiritual ones. The people who are really at the top of what they're doing creatively or spiritually or whatever. So my favorite explanation of this to date, besides just a physics textbook or a theoretical physics Tegmark or Greene, like I've said, is a book that I've referenced and an author that I've referenced, and it's called Beyond the Flower of Life by Maureen Germain. Amazing book for me. Just kind of puts everything together. The physics, the trippy meditation stuff, the spiritual. It's kind of, for me, a really good guide on what do I do with where I find myself right now. But before that was a book that I had in my library and on my docket for probably 15, 20 years. And I'm trying to remember who exactly told me about it, but I know I was in a traditional therapy situation to deal with the breakup of a relationship. And when I look back, I can't recall much about the therapist, and if they're unusual, and I've come across a couple of those, then I do. But she said, have you heard of or read this book called Many Lives, Many Masters? And I'm like, no, didn't even know what it was about. And it's by Brian L. Weiss. And it was really kind of pivotal and fantastic for me at the time because it was right what I needed, right at the time I needed it. And I think the universe has a wonderful way of doing that. When we're ready and when we've laid an appropriate foundation, and I do think that that's what this is about. Some people, things happen to an entirely different way, but I think the majority of people, who do I want in charge of my future beside myself? I want somebody who's well grounded, I want somebody who's reasonable, and I think that's what the universe is trying to do. So, as always, thank you for joining me today. Have a blessed rest of the day. Dahan Avad, and I will see you back here tomorrow.